I was a humble flight lieutenant, a flight commander in 609 Squadron, which we had been on Spitfires. We came with Spitfires to Duxford, and then we transferred to Typhoons with some hesitation, because compared with the Spitfire, they were very large and lumbering machines. Unfortunately, one of our Belgian flight commanders was killed in an accident at Duxford, which I will very well remember, which was over 60 years ago. But it was at early morning when they were taking off in formation, as we used to do. It was a grass airfield, and his tyre burst, and the consequence was that the machine that was next door to him collided with him, and he was killed. It wasn't altogether unusual for aircraft tyres to burst when the aircraft was taking off, but it was unusual for there to be such a disastrous result as happened in the case of Francois, who, as I say, was killed. This was all the more tragic because another Belgian flight commander, a very well respected man, Piker Oftenberg, some 14 months beforehand, had been also killed in a training accident. I mean, one expected people to be killed in operations, but not in accidents. And this was all the more had a bad effect on the morale of the squadron. However, the morale of the squadron survived and fought throughout the rest of the war on Typhoons and later on Tempests.
How was the Typhoon as an aircraft after flying the Spitfire?
It was, of course, very much faster than the Spitfire, but it was much heavier aircraft. It hadn't got the same flexibility as the Spitfire. You felt in the Spitfire that you were part of the machine, but you didn't feel that in the Typhoon. You felt that you were in the Typhoon, and maybe you felt you were in control of it, or maybe you felt you weren't. Maybe you felt that the machine was in control of you. But it was a very successful machine, and indeed, I think, but for the Typhoon, and when it was armed with cannon and rockets, it's very possible that the war wouldn't have been won at the time that it was won.
I served with what was then called the Merchant Ship Fighting Unit, called them CAM ships, Catapult Armed Merchantmen, and we had old Hurricanes on a very short catapult aboard a merchant ship. It was rather a pleasant sensation, because it was just like someone giving a great big push in the back, you know, and you were doing 75 miles an hour and 70 feet, so it was quite 13 rockets underneath you. If they all fired, you went off quite well. Not very different, but I was lucky in that respect. You know? They were used pretty well as probably a scarecrow for the convoys, and they operated from 1941 to 1943. I finished up at the end of it aboard the Empire Darwin, and July of 1943 we were in the last stage of the convoy coming back from Gibraltar back to the UK. Two actual CAM ships, Empire Darwin and the Empire Tide. I think the German intelligence went astray because the unit had actually been officially disbanded, and that news perhaps may have gone through to the wrong place, because the convoy was attacked on the evening of July 28, 1943. I was launched off and managed to knock down a Focke-Wulf 200. The Empire Tide, Paddy Flynn, he was also launched off, and he got one. And just before we were launched off, saw one of the most amazing sights I think I've ever seen. It was a US Liberator and a Focke-Wulf Courier, two 4-engine aircraft going side by side right across the front of the convoy, blazing away at each other, and that Courier went into the water. The Liberator, we understand there was a Mayday, and I doubt very much if he ever got back to Casablanca. So I was lucky enough. It was a nice July day, and was able to bail out and picked up by the sloop HMS Leith and got back home safely. And as I say, that was the official end of the unit. So it had served, I think they had probably 35 merchant ships involved all told, made of certainly maybe 1,000 or so voyages, and it proved to be, as I say, pretty much of a scarecrow. It meant the convoy felt a little bit safer.
It's very encouraging, I think, and it's very encouraging. They say that children now know so little about it that they didn't know on which side Adolf Hitler fought, and so on and so on. Well, this may be so, but it's not really consistent with what happens at Duxford today, because at Duxford today you find young people who are only too anxious to stand in a queue to get the signatures of people who were pilots in the 1940s, and receive them with respect and could I say affection. So that I think it's a very, very encouraging fact that Duxford is still alive and very much alive.